Good afternoon. I'm Shaleen Jain, and I'm a professor in civil and environmental engineering. And one of the big questions, let's see if this works. One of the big questions in the realm of AI work is how to deploy AI in an ethical, safe, and fair manner. And this is important at all levels, private citizens, communities, industry, and governments. So for the next half hour, let's focus on these issues at the intersection of technology and society. And we have essentially four interlinked facets here: social, ethical, policy, and legal. And so we have with us today Jim Isaak, who's an electrical engineer and a past president of IEEE Computer Society, a visionary in the field of AI. Jim writes extensively on the future of society, one powered by AI. And we have Harlan Onsrud, who's an engineer and a lawyer and a professor of spatial informatics at UMaine. He's the past chair of the U.S. National Committee on Data for Science and Technology of the National Research Council. And finally, we have Peter Guffin, who's a visiting professor of practice and co-director of Information Privacy Law program at the UMaine Law School. And he heads the privacy and data security practice at Pierce Atwood LLP. He has written extensively on cybersecurity law, information privacy, and has consulted and counseled on Wall Street. So, Jim?
Okay, I think we have some slides. Let me expand a little on aspects of this bio because they relate to some of the questions that have come up. Whoops, can you go back one? Thank you. The communications, IEEE USA is a part of IEEE that deals with federal policy. You need to go back one again. And that federal policy issues are things like privacy, cybersecurity, 5G rollout and technology, and so forth. So the topics that we're talking about here roll into that. I chair a committee on the actual applications of communications policy and computer policy and participate in the AI committee as well. I think Walter's also part of that activity. Another one of the areas I'm involved with is the IEEE standards work on AI ethics. And all these are hot links. So when you get the slides, you can actually go through in depth and see what kinds of documents are hiding behind this. There's a huge amount of documents on AI ethics. I've highlighted one here in the next slide on the AI persuasion or nudging policies. And then finally, I'm involved with the IEEE Collaboratech activity, where we have some communities that can maintain an ongoing dialogue on some of these topics. And again, those are open to the public. So if you're interested in some of the topics there, it includes privacy and trust as one topic. And another one that's just come up is broadband and COVID-19 and the experience for rural broadband with that. So those are the kinds of things we're working with there. So go to the next slide. Okay. Well, Anyway, you'll have a chance to look at the slides as they become available online. One of the challenges you heard about earlier is the fact that a major aspect of AI application today is in advertising and huge industries, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, are all driven in part by advertising revenue. So that drive driven with AI behind it creates an opportunity to both maximize the effectiveness of AI at bringing forward customers and encouraging them to buy classic marketing advertising, but also influencing them. And one of the challenges we face with that influence is twofold. Certainly there are people out there who want to influence people independent of their actual best interests. So there can be abuse of that potentially in that way. And the second one is letting AIs loose to maximize a specific objective, whether it's the most people buying a certain deodorant or whether it's to vote for a certain candidate. One of the problems we have with AI, deep learning, particularly when it's built in with feedback loops, is it can determine how to best accomplish its objective in ways that the humans involved with it may not at all understand. One of the questions that popped up earlier was on AI bias and variations of that, but AIs in deep learning are capable of acquiring and applying approaches that the people who created them may not understand. So that leads to my, well, and I should add that AIs are not able to explain themselves. Sometimes people running them can, and sometimes you can back engineer, reverse engineer, and try and figure out why the AIs came up with those conclusions. But complex systems like this are not always easily reverse engineered, and it's not clear that AIs will ever be able to actually explain why they did something. I might add, humans aren't really good at that either. So as we move closer to human type intelligence, we shouldn't be surprised if the machines can't explain their decisions. The next slide basically focuses on where I see the biggest challenge we face. Abraham Lincoln is reputed to have said this. It isn't actually his quote, but we'll use it as his anyway. You can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. I take that to be three assumptions. And if you apply AI to that, the real question is, can you fool a sufficient number of people a sufficient amount of the time? Which leads to this issue of AI-driven persuasion, nudging, propaganda, brainwashing. There are a variety of names for what it can be done there. And there are fairly good research results coming out about what AIs can derive about individuals in terms of their personality and various characteristics. My last slide, useful slide is the next one, might as well go to it. Points to a couple of the research people doing work on this. Mikhail Kosinski at Stanford is doing work on analytics and privacy and psychological analysis using AI technology and Facebook. So that's one reference point for that kind of research. There's also efforts, the school that Stanford had on persuasion using technology, that program is now closed down. However, I noticed Oxford has a similar program on the online persuasion technology. So this area is being something that's studied. We are starting to understand that it can be done and how it can be done, and the use of AI and applying to it. It is multidisciplinary. This is not something that the technologists understand. It's not something the psychologists understand. It requires that multiple disciplinary perspective and leads to some really challenging questions about whether AIs, not maliciously, not the Terminator type AI, but simply AIs trying to optimize a particular objective, will start to influence us in ways that go beyond our control or our awareness. So
Thank you, Jain.
There, and we can go to the questions
Great.
that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Jain. Harlan?
Okay, well, as you've been hearing from most of the previous speakers, the positive societal applications of AI are myriad. Many of the applications, particularly those focused on advancing science, tend not to raise human privacy or human autonomy concerns, and indeed promise great benefits for humanity. Yet, many current deployments have already given rise to substantial negative societal effects. Most of us interact with AI developed algorithms on a daily basis, yet most of us are unaware of those interactions, and most of us are unaware of their effects on our daily lives. Our legal system, combined with technological advancements, has made massive accumulation of data possible, as we've been hearing. By knowing your digital tracks in detail, AI techniques are better able to analyze your past action patterns and predict your future actions, as well as those of millions of other people and your interactions with those other people. Algorithmic operations applied to big data are being used to classify and target individuals to sell you goods and services more effectively and influence your decisions and attitudes in social and political contexts up to and including voting. Modern decision guidance systems are hurting us in our choices. These conditions have also made massive wealth concentrations possible. Slide 2. I'm not going to go into details, but AI has been a major factor in automated propagation of discrimination, has greatly facilitated the expansion of income inequality, will continue to be a growing contributor to massive job loss globally, and many of the negative effects of AI are a result of a US legal framework which is overly supportive of surveillance capitalism. Now, I would argue, of course, that capitalism is good, but not all capitalistic approaches are well suited to support justice in a democracy. Jason Lanier, the father of virtual reality, argues that there is more than one way to build an information society, and we in the US have chosen the self-destructive path. So let me just suffice it to say that AI advancements have been complicit in advancing serious, widespread and substantial challenges for democracies. Slide through the next slide. So how do we flip this around? How do we alter some of the applications of AI to convert their use to positive forces in improving societal conditions? And I think research is going to be a large part of the solution. And one fundamental question we are currently pursuing here in Maine is, how may information societies enable rich opportunities for all humans to more equitably share in the financial benefits of vibrant information economies, while also supporting the agency and autonomy of individual humans? That is, how can we bring ethics back into the equation? Slide 4. So a current research focus at the University of Maine is on the development and exploration of ethics-driven, market-based, combined legal technological models. Technology by itself is not the answer, but neither is merely tweaking the legal system. We need to explore a range of combined legal technological approaches and then deploy those models through proof of concept software development in order to illustrate just exactly how those solutions could actually work. So again, we need to get back to basics. So my last slide is, if you're interested in the details of some of our current work on these issues, here's simply a recent paper of potential interest. And thank you,
Harlan.
So Harlan, that was a great introduction to my presentation on the intersection between data protection laws and regulations and the use of AI technologies. What I thought I would do in this segment is really focus on that intersection and to really put shine a light on the fact that the AI systems, or many of them that we've heard about today, actually the inputs are personal data and the outputs as well from these AI systems. Many of them constitute personal data. You know, these outputs representing statistical guesses, not factual information about individuals, and they're used to classify people, make predictions about people, make judgments and decisions affecting people. So from a data protection perspective, one might think of an AI system as actually manufacturing personal data about an individual. So recognizing that there are, you know, lots of positives, as Harlan just mentioned, there are also, you know, risks with respect to unfair discriminatory outcomes, perpetuation of existing socioeconomic disparities. So data protection regulators across the globe are actually beginning to address the use of AI technologies, attempting to mitigate those risks, recognizing that AI technologies are really you know, becoming increasingly sophisticated and widespread. So the focus of looking at, or my reason for wanting to compare different countries and how they regulate AI is that I think putting some attention to the similarities and the differences is useful in helping guide organizations, guiding policymakers with respect to how to comply with data protection rules and principles and ethical requirements with respect to the use of AI. To that end, in this presentation, I'd like to look quickly at the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission here in the US. I'd like to look at the UK's Information Commissioner's Office and how they are approaching AI regulation. And then the last would be the Singapore Personal Data Protection Commission. I chose these three because each represents influential data protection regulators. So with respect to the next slide, with respect to the Federal Trade Commission, you know, they will be the first to recognize that they've had a long-standing relationship with regulating algorithms in the financial sector. And that is through their enforcement powers with respect to the Fair Credit Reporting Act. In their role as an enforcer of the Federal Trade Commission Act, which prohibits unfair and deceptive trade practices, you know, they also have played the leading role here in the US with respect to data protection regulation. So they recently, as recent as April of this year, issued a guidance which set forth some key principles, and they're listed here on the slide. And they may look familiar to some who are familiar with the Fair Information Privacy Practices, but they go a bit further, and they actually build upon some of the principles in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The guidance, however, fell short, in my view, in terms of really not being very specific and helpful and useful in addressing the unique challenges in the AI context. Other than this FTC Act, there really is no comprehensive federal data protection regulation with respect to AI here in the US. So turning our attention to the UK, which has as its lead data protection enforcer the Information Commissioner's Office, they've actually been leading the way, I think, in the world around regulation of AI, again, from a data protection compliance perspective. In other words, trying to address the risks to fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals, the kinds of interests and rights that Harlan was focusing on in his presentation. And in their work, they have come up with an auditing framework, which actually is useful for them in terms of auditing organizations that are actually using AI to make sure that the organizations are complying with the Data Protection Act in the UK and the GDPR, which is the European data protection law. And what they do is really, I think, do a really good job of drilling down into some of these more nuanced issues with respect to what constitutes fair, lawful, and transparent processing. They dive deeply into this explainability issue that was first discussed today by Carla Broadley. And one of the things I really liked about the UK is they really brought forward this concept of a data protection impact assessment when an organization is either developing or deploying some AI technology. And they also, yep.
We'll go to some questions and let all the speakers respond. So actually the
Terrific.
One, yep.
Thank you.
So the first one I will pose to you is, can you address the implications of the use of AI technologies in education with regards to the protection of FERPA data?
Yes, very, very timely subject, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it comes up in the context of both FERPA, and also it comes up in the connection of compliance with myriad state laws that actually go further than FERPA in actually addressing the online providers who are actually providing these different solutions that are being used to collect information for useful educational purposes. But the use of that information for purposes of better informing their algorithms to better inform teachers and educators about their performance. It's an area of increasing interest at both the federal, the federal law here is FERPA, as you mentioned, but there are various state enactments of FERPA and other laws like the California Student Information Privacy Act, which has been found in, which has been actually followed in a lot of other states, including Maine. Excellent.
Great. Thank you. So second question addressed to Jim. How are the ethical and social aspects being integrated into K through 16 education focused on computing, AI, and so on?
I'm not directly in the area of dealing with how to integrate this into the education system, but unfortunately, ethics has not received a very high visibility in any level of education, university down. And so the social impact issues are both of high concern, and I'll give you a quick example of that in a minute, and not formally put into the curriculum at almost any level short of the university, where you typically do get ethics as a topic. I'll give you a quick example. I'm now judging the Young Inventors program here in New Hampshire, and one of the inventors was demonstrating a machine that would go next to your mailbox and be used to immediately shred junk mail, so that your personal information on that junk mail would not end up in your waste paper basket, visible to somebody who might read that. Yeah, for a fourth grader, I thought that was a wonderful understanding of privacy issues, and I'll take it. But yeah, it goes much deeper. And the problem is that until people understand the kind of issues that Peter and others have raised here, and Peter's comment about the manufacturing of personal data is dead on. So people understand that that's what AI is doing on a broad basis across the board in our online systems, and how that impacts their lives, they're basically running blind. They're not in a position to apply an informed consumer or informed voter understanding of what's going on.
Great. Harlan, would you like to add to that?
Well, a couple of things. Yes, certainly the ethics are something that we're dealing with in the computer science curriculum as mandated, of course, by ABET accreditation. And we spend a huge amount of time. We make sure our computer science students are at a level high enough to really understand computer science. So we typically teach this at the junior, senior level, really delving into the ethics, the ramifications of these technologies that you are going to be helping foist on the world. So certainly at that level, we're doing that. Somebody had raised the issue of ethics before, and of course, when we're dealing with ethics, we're talking about concepts like justice, non-malfeasance, beneficence, but one of the key ones here is autonomy of the individual in these instances. So one of the things we've been focused on is really trying to say, all right, so how can we enable individuals much greater control over their own information exposure? And what's the legal technological model that would allow us to best enable that? And then we can start talking about different legal paradigms, whether they're in the GDPR in Europe, the UK, Singapore, the US constitutional system. What are some solutions that we can actually pursue right now? And I think if we get back to the kind of basic ethical foundations, they provide us, the philosophers actually provide us with some very substantive direction for us to move in for the engineering, software engineering community, as well as the business community, where we need to be heading.
Thank you, Harlan. Let me pose this last question to all of you, and let's start with Peter. Is can you touch upon ways in which data privacy laws and standards are being upheld in applications such as autonomous vehicles and so on? Peter,
Yeah, that's
briefly,
a great
please.
question. The reality is there really isn't any case law that's developing in this area just yet. And there's a lot of self-regulatory approaches. For example, in the automotive area, there's been for quite some time now, a self-regulatory approach to how to manage all the data and how to find ways to provide the right calibration with respect to both security of that data as well as the privacy implications of collecting all that data about individuals. Most of the self-regulatory approaches, most of the ways in which regulators are thinking about this globally, really come down to the tenets that are set forth by the FTC. The transparency, the notice, right? The explainability, making sure consumers are aware of what actually is being captured. But there are real challenges in the AI area in terms of matching the AI context to non-AI contexts in which we are familiar. So mapping the FIPS, for example, the Fair Information Privacy Practices, to AI, it's not a complete solution by any stretch. And I think regulators and consumers and manufacturers of these, the users of these AI technologies are realizing that and building into their compliance programs something that is sensitive to the different governance frameworks that are being developed.
Thank you. I'll hand it off to my colleague, Ali Abedi, and he'll wrap up.
Thank you very much, Shaleen. I would like to thank all the panelists today for the great presentation, and also my fellow moderators for keeping us on time. Also, thanks everyone to all the attendees today, and with your very thoughtful questions, we'll make sure that the unanswered questions will be answered on our website. I would like to thank Office of the Vice President for Research for hosting this webinar, Dr. Kody Bahramian, for his vision behind this webinar. Also my colleagues, Tammy Crosby and Tilan Hobson on the back end that were basically organizing and coordinating all this. So this webinar was the tip of the iceberg. We tried to barely scratch different aspects of a very broad area of AI and machine learning. In the fall, we are hoping to start a seminar series, which will be dedicated to one topic at a time with more depth. So look for more announcements. And again, thanks very much for joining us. And this will conclude our AI webinar for today. Have a great day.